Say, Louise, do you know this story about this South African guy who went paddle skiing and almost died?
I do not, Robin, but please do tell.
Yeah, so in 1995, there was this guy who went paddle skiing in the harbor near Cape Town. Paddle or surf skiing is kind of like kayaking, but in a longer and narrower boat. Um, anyway, this guy got into trouble. And luckily, though, he was saved by a surfer who happened to be around.
By a surfer. Cool, Robin. Really inspiring. But do you know we are recording a podcast?
Yes, bear with me for 2 seconds, Louise, because that fortunate or unfortunate, depends on how you look at it, paddle skier and the surfer, they went on to build one of the most well-known advertising agencies in the whole of South Africa. I am, of course, talking about Joe Public, and the men in the water are founders Gareth Leck and Pepe Marais. But get this, Louise, that origin story was just the tip of the iceberg, or die oortjies van die seekoei, as they apparently say in Afrikaans. There's a lot of interesting things to say about Joe Public. They went through this incredible journey, won tons of awards, and launched some of the most creative campaigns out there. They also introduced a pricing model not based on billable hours, way before you and I even knew what billable meant. Basically, there's a lot of stories and insights that we can get from Joe Public and its origins, which is why we're joined today by Pepe Marais, or rather Dr. Pepe Marais, I should say, and we'll be covering topics like his academic research on purpose and business, and more importantly, the creative scene in South Africa.
Okay, let's do that in a minute. But first, a word from our sponsor, Teamleader Orbit. Can I take this one, Robin?
You can, Louise. Go crazy.
Thank you. Teamleader Orbit is, without any doubt, the best software for agencies. Not only does it help you get a clear overview of customers, leads, and projects, but it also gives you insight into profitability and capacity and helps you break down the dreaded silos between, for example, accounting, project teams, etc. In short, if you're running an agency and you're not using Teamleader Orbit yet, what are you even doing? You can go to teamleader.be or .nl/orbit to learn more and get started today.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you, Robin.
So, Pepe, welcome to Agency Life. We're very happy to have you on. First off, where are you joining us from?
Thanks, Robin, and thanks, Louise. I'm joining you from overcast Johannesburg, which is not the capital of South Africa. It's about 40 kilometers to the north, to the south of the capital, which is Pretoria. But it is our hub of advertising. Probably 60% of our economy sits in Johannesburg.
Yeah. We previously introduced you with a watery story. Did we get the details right?
Look, I can get into the details of that day. It's kind of close. Those it's called paddle skis. They're not exactly like a surf ski. They're very similar to surfboards, quite short and light, but you sit on your bum. Yeah. So the surfers have a big thing against paddle skiers because they're almost like you haven't evolved to walk yet. You're still sitting on your bum. So there's quite a lot of animosity between surfers and paddle skiers. So that's the one thing. It's like a surfboard. The other thing is we were surfing massive waves. I'm talking waves with faces of 30, 40 feet, but really big monster waves, which was stupid. And we should never have gone out. So and I wiped out one of the first waves. It was so big, I bounced so much I'd rolled over, and the wave washed me into the wall of the harbor, which we've got a thing called doloso, which are these concrete structures. And I broke my nose and I concussed myself badly. I got trapped under the rocks. So I was drowning. And so that's a little bit of detail there. And then I never knew there was a human hand in me surviving that day. It was fascinating because I was about 25 years old. And the interesting thing about turning at the doors of death, it's actually an amazing experience. So wait till the day that you come to the end of your life, you'll see it's a beautiful experience. You just go into the state of bliss. But I woke up and I was in a roll of red pipes, and the NSRI, which is our National Sea Rescue Institute, the boat came and picked me out of the water. So I never thought like what happened there. I just thought I was lucky. And only 3 years later, because I had this idea for takeaway advertising with another friend, but we needed a business guy. And then when I got introduced to this young Gareth Leck, he told me the story about this idiot paddle skier that he saved in 1995. And as he told me the detail of the story, how he picked me up, or this person up from under the rocks, and put him on this roll of pipes and went out and phoned the NSRI and phoned the ambulance, I put two and two together and realized, geez, I've met the guy who saved my life 3 years after. And that was then the reason that we went, okay, well, it doesn't matter if you're good at business or like we're starting a business. That was the key reason. And he's my partner to this day, 26 years later. You know, I work my ass off for him because I probably owe my life to him, you know. So that's like a little bit more detail to that crazy story.
Let's talk about creativity a bit, because it's often said that the creative industry in South Africa punches above its weight, internationally especially. And in a past season of our Agency Live podcast, a guest called Elvira Jasper from We Are Brain, she actually pointed out that the best creative agencies, she said, are in South Africa. So that's where the country really came on our radar. Recently, Joe Public also won the Loerie Award for Agency of the Year. Could you explain the creativity and the success of the South African creative scene?
It's absolutely, specifically from 1990 to 2000. I mean, if we look back all the years, our industry, which is relatively small, you know, if you take, for instance, I mean, we've got 60 million people as a population, but 80% of them are not really within the economy. So it's a big country, big by land mass, big by population, but not a big industry. And then we also have our currencies, the rand, which is pretty much 1/20th of the euro. You know, you need 20 rands for 1 euro. So very weak currency. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I think it's potentially part of the challenges of this country that we've been through and the diversity of this country. It is an extremely creative country. And we have traditionally been in the top 10 in the world year after year after year. I think the highest ranking we've ever had as a country is number 4. I don't know if it's Cannes ranking or Gun Report. It's probably more Cannes, because Cannes is like the mecca of our industry. So very, very, and then if you look at some of the leaders of the big international networks, creative leaders, like the John Hunt heads up TBWA, you know, Tony Granger, Matthew Bull, we've got a lot of top-end creative leaders. I must mention Mariana O'Kelly as well, so it doesn't just sound like we've got male leaders. You know, we've got Mariana O'Kelly, one of our top leaders, who's now leading internationally. So yes, a very, very strong industry. We've lost our foothold a bit of late, and I think we've slipped down to, I think we ranked number 24th. And I think it's linked to the globalization of our industry. And I don't mind that, but there were repercussions. As an indie agency, I've got quite a fierce opinion about it, but I don't want to start knocking other agencies because everyone's doing a great job. But I do think what happened was the focus for the business leaders of agencies in our country, my experience, and I've seen that internationally as well. The business leaders start focusing on making the shareholders' returns, whereas 30, 40 years ago, they were focusing on client relationship and selling work. Yeah. And the selling of work has been relegated to strategists and to creative people. And actually, creative people's jobs are to conceptualize, conceive ideas, and to make beautiful work. And strategists' jobs are to be the fertile soil for ideas and find insights. And the business leader's job should be to be on the front end facing clients. And that's disappeared. And I think that's then started linking to the performance. It's a hypothesis, but I think it could be very close to the truth.
So when Jared Sinman from VML South Africa recently said it's hard not to conclude that as a country we're falling behind creatively, you say yes, this is a trend that actually going on. I agree with this.
Yes, but then I'm very aware of how nature works, and that, you know, after winter you get spring, and without the cycle, you lose awareness of what's important. And maybe this is a bit of a wake-up call, and hopefully people will start sitting up and remember what our industry is about, even globally. Even globally, we look at CAN as the standard, but it's 0.0001% of what the industry does. I mean, I put on a television in my hotel room in London, and I don't see any decent advertising. Or yes, I see the beautiful BA piece of work that's done that adorns some billboards for real in London, which is spectacular. But that's like 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. So I think the global industry probably has a bit of a challenge. And another thing, actually, when I think about it, let me not just blame globalization. And I'm not blaming. I'm kind of looking at the problem, and then I'm saying, okay, so how do we solve it? But if I look at what digital's done to our industry, short-termism, I mean, Sir John Hegarty, the founder of Bartle Bogle Hegarty, one of the co-founders, and Orlando Wood spoke in Cannes to the fact that 94% of everything we do is ineffective because we've become completely obsessed with short-termism, and they called it salesmanship. So we're all struggling to deal with the transformation of the industry, overly focusing on thousands of little busyness pieces that lives for 20 seconds on a social feed and makes no impact, and we've forgotten about the power of brand. So I actually think there's a global little bit of a darkness in creativity that's maybe needed for us to start refocusing on what we do bring to the world. And now there's AI on top of it, So probably one of the best times to be alive, because it's challenging, and that's when amazing things happen. Amazing things happen when it really goes bad.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say it's going bad, or it's gone bad right now. How do you see the industry getting out of the slump?
Well, just refocusing on what it is that we're about, because ultimately the only value that we bring to clients is creativity. And now I'm also becoming quite passionate, because now since my academic journey, I've gone from just being an intuitive, very gut-led individual to a more balanced. I'm starting to love data. So I'm definitely seeing, and we're actually in discussion with a technology expert company. And we actually want to bring the best of both worlds together. So I don't want to go like, oh, it's 100% creativity and 0% digital and technology, or it's 100%. I just think it's become 98% technology. And I think the road forward is to rebalance it 50-50. To find the balance between technology and creativity is probably going to be the agencies, the businesses that can find that balance. I think that's where wisdom lies. That's where magic lies. I think that balance. So the path forward for us is going to be to create that balance and take that collective value to our clients. I'm speaking off the cuff, but I think that's where we're intuitively aiming.
What's your take on AI and on AI investments at Joe Public? Where do you stand, and what does that roadmap look like?
So we are behind the curve. We're starting to use AI for some of our executions. But this is, I literally said to Gareth yesterday, because I've been following a bit of Elon Musk, just in terms of, the whole chaos in the US, which I don't get involved with politics. Whenever there's politics, I always say focus on the work. Just do better work. Just do better work. It's all we can control. But incidentally, one thing that did stick, because he spoke at Cannes, and I missed his talk. So I actually went and Googled and watched his talk at Cannes. And there's no doubt that AI is going to be a phenomenal tool to actually enable us to return to have more time to think, because that's actually the biggest challenge. We don't have enough time to think. But we are so behind the curve in terms of using AI to start taking care of the menial tasks. It's sort of just by chance. Springbok are our potential partners that we're speaking to. And hopefully, if we can together bring creativity and technology and create that balance offering for our clients, then they could be the partner that can help us speed up this transformation that we want to embrace in South Africa.
Recently, you said in an article, as an agency, we spend 95% of our time creating crap. That's why creatives are leading our agencies. So when you say crap, do you then mean the short-term, hard sell kind of advertising?
Yeah, I always find it interesting that we call that, look, sale, you'll never beat with a concept. 50% of sale will always work better than any idea. Mostly, not always. I mean, I can immediately think of beautiful work done for VW in London years ago, surprisingly ordinary prices. It was magnificent. I mean, that's great retail. But the mix 20 years ago, 25 years plus ago, the marketing mix used to be 60% short-termism, like retail sales, and 40% brand. I've experienced it to reduce to like 90% 10, 95% 5, 98% 2, because we measure these things. In our agency, we measure like crazy. Mm-hmm. So that reduction of the magic and the overtaking of the logic, you know, creative people love to do the magic. And you keep them happy when they're doing 4 versus 6, but when they start doing 1 versus 1 out of 10 and eventually 2 out of 100, it is very difficult to keep them motivated. So there is a place for short-term work. Of course there is, because often you need to generate sales through offers. But I do think we have lost a lot of our foothold in terms of doing brand work. And brand work is super valuable. Brand work creates trust. And brand work is what makes a consumer decide between one product and another product. So,
when you say actually creatives would like to do more brand work because they don't want to spend 95% of their time creating this short-term sales stuff for social media, why is it that we're spending so much time on that when actually the creatives want to do more brand work?
I don't know. I think, and look, you do get creative people. Creative people are so complex when you start you get creative people that love conceptualizing, and you get others that actually don't mind doing really slick, quick, fast turnaround. But it becomes very difficult to be a business that's building a high-end product and a sort of a commodity product on the same production line. So inevitably, you start using your creative factory, using your racehorses to do donkey work. I think there's just such a demand for this short-term work. And the approach is so different. Like, I don't understand every single post must be a new post. You know, now suddenly you have 180 assets that must be rolled out in a few days. I actually think people have become so obsessed with busyness. If you had to cut in half, we had an example of that. We had a client where we were doing 147 campaigns a year. That's one every 2 days with multiple assets. And then the CMO that came new into that business was actually an actuary. And he did the math on this and said, I'm wasting money. And he reduced the campaigns to 70. It was something like 76 campaigns. He cut it in half, which doubled the caliber of the output, and the brand went into growth. That's a fact. I'm not even making that up. It was a retail group that subsequently failed in lockdown in South Africa, went completely out of business. Very sad story. But that was one of the retailers within that group, the only one that was actually growing. And it was the one that got sold off to another retail house. Because why? We did less work at a higher creative output that created more impact in the market. And often I wonder if people are aware of the commercial side of what we do, if they understand it enough.
Do you think it's agencies' role or responsibility to challenge clients on that and to convince them that they shouldn't do 200 campaigns a year, but rather do less and do it better?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, if the client themselves is not aware of the impact of this approach. And that's why I'm saying I'm not negating the importance of integrated campaigns that live across multiple platforms. Absolutely. But we're doing too much and we have no time to think. And I do think the ultimate responsibility should actually be the person in charge of the budget, because you're wasting money. You're wasting money. That's the truth. But in the absence of that, yes, it should be agencies' jobs, and it should be the business leaders within agencies that make this their job, because it's just better business for all. It's a win-win for the client and for the agency.
It's interesting that in this specific podcast, many smart people from creative agencies have said kind of the same thing, which is the industry's lost its way by focusing on the short term while investing too little in the brand, and we have to pump out 1 million assets per time unit, and that's just not very effective. To me, it feels like the industry should actually like market itself a bit more instead of having like these business leader to business leader conversations. Perhaps Joe Public should lead the charge in saying, hey, CMOs of the world, don't ask us to do 1 million assets because it'll be counterproductive.
Yeah, I agree. I am leading the charge in this conversation, but it's also it's not easy, because I don't want to come across arrogant as if I'm this expert knowing everything. We're all trying to figure out how to maneuver forward in this world. But I can see we've got one specific client which is 80% focused on brand and 20% focused on short. So almost completely the inverse to the rest. And that brand is the only brand that's growing, that used to grow at double digits. Now with a tough economy, it's sort of started flattening out, but the rest are on decline. So I've got evidence that it works. But I think the structures, the big brand structures, are so complex and there's so many layers and it's so difficult to manage it. And I reckon because people are still hitting their KPIs and their sales, there's no incentive to change. It's almost as if you have to start going into brand decline to change your way, because we're all creatures of habit. But I'm absolutely convinced, as I said, definitely have the marketing mix in place, but get more of a focus on brand, because consumers buy what you believe in, not what you're selling. They buy like something that resonates deeply with them. We know this. We see this. We see sales of that level of work instantly. But we still believe that we call it hard-working work. I say that work doesn't really work. That's the wallpaper. That's the crap that I mentioned in that. But I'm very sensitive to I don't want to be judgy. I want to be part of figuring things out and working with clients to get there, working with our people to get there. And it's part of we've got a problem and we need to solve it. So I'm not frustrated or negative about it, but I do think there's truth in that for sure. And if other senior leaders are saying that, then it has to be truthful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk of something that makes Joe Public a bit special, which is your pricing, because Joe Public is known for pioneering the takeaway advertising and pricing model, where price is not based on billable hours. How did that idea emerge, and could you actually perhaps explain it to our listeners?
Yeah, so that was the idea right at the beginning that excited me enough to leave my job at BBDO, which agency in South Africa was called Network, phenomenal agency back in the day. I'm very fond of the founders of that agency, like phenomenal creative leaders. And it was such an amazing idea, the idea of takeaway advertising. So where you have rare, medium, and well-done ideas on a menu, and you cost your thinking. You literally say, well, you pay me for my thinking, not for my time. So if I come up in 5 minutes or 15 hours, if it's a great idea, you pay me a price point. And that's how we launched our brand in South Africa. Unfortunately, what happened with that model of ours, and we've got charging models in our very complex system now. And again, because back then, we mainly did radio and television and print. And it was very easy to menutize that. But how do you menutize 28 different assets at different formats for different platforms on a menu? I mean, it's so as the business grew and as the clients grew with us, and as we picked up bigger and bigger blue chips, the actual takeaway menu and system became irrelevant. However, Joe Public Amsterdam launched in 2011 on the takeaway menu and on the takeaway system, and built quite a formidable agency in that market. I mean, they won Agency of the Year this year again in the Dutch market for the second time. And that's up against substantial international players. But they also realized that the model becomes restrictive in terms of your growth, because part of the model was no pitching, and it's got its limitations. But we are looking at using it in a different way now. So at the moment, we've reintroduced it into our market as our top end work for clients. So we've reintroduced takeaway advertising more as a system that takes away the laborious process of advertising. So when we've got a long-standing client and they want a really, really top-end, brave piece of creative work, we advise them to work through our takeaway menu, which is the same price point. And there's a couple of mandates in terms of how the process works that allows for much purer work. So we're busy reintroducing takeaway on this side of the world, and we've just sort of stopped with takeaway in Europe, but we'll reintroduce this system in time.
Can you explain how it works specifically? Like a big client knocks on your door and says, we want to, for instance, launch this new product in the market. Can they then buy off of the menu a brand campaign or a strategy, or what is on the menu, and how do you work with that?
Yeah. So Amsterdam worked exactly like that. So they menutized ideas and they menutized strategy. And then only production can't be menutized because it's so dependent on the idea. So the concepts were all menutized. And that's exactly still what we're doing now, is we menutize the concept, which includes strategy. And then we just keep production SQ. And at the moment, what we're finding, because it's on our side of the world, and we all collectively figuring out where, because it's such an amazing system, because that's what's also happened with our industry, is the costing models change radically. And you end up paying the same rate for a short-term piece of work as you pay for brand work. It doesn't make sense, you know. And sometimes you pay a little bit more for the brand work because maybe you get more senior creatives, but it's marginal, which doesn't make sense. There's a difference between a Porsche and a Tata for a reason, you know. So, well, then a Tata is a cheap car in our market, whatever the cheap car in your market is. But so it's another exciting prospect, is to find a way of putting a spotlight on work that really blows the lights out, you know, that really adds value to the brand. Because ultimately, that's all we want to do, is do the best work for the brands we work on. And we're finding when we go through the less processed process of advertising on takeaway, we get better work and more impact in the market. But we've only done 4 campaigns of this nature in the last year, so it's early days. But I think as we do more and more and we build momentum, there will be evidence that a more simplistic, almost the way we used to work in the 90s, because work is over-researched and over-processed. It's completely over-researched and over-processed. If Steve Jobs had to research whether he had to invent a phone with one button back in the day, the consumer would have said, no, we don't want that. So I think research is good for insights, but we're using research to validate our thinking. It's crazy.
So you're basically taking away some of the sometimes unnecessary steps in the modern advertising process to get what you call pure work in the end.
100%. And hence, at the moment, it works best with clients who trust us. So clients who's been with us for 7, 8, 9 years, 10 years, they're buying into it because they go, yes, we understand we have a mandate for the strategy, because they're still in charge, they're still the client, and they have final sign-off on the concept. and we agree to one revert according to the price point. That's included in the price point, and we hit it every single time so far. If we don't, then obviously we have to charge more. But then when it comes to the actual production phase, and so we take out all those reverts, we take out the research, and they give us pretty much autonomy in the production process. They're still part of it. They still come to the pre-prods. They still come to all the little, but they step into those rooms with trust. And it's actually quite incredible. It's so much more fluid, and the work is at a radical different level to the normal process work. And I think the process is there because people are just in fear. So everyone wants validation that we're not making a mistake. But we forget about the people in the room. There's so much marketing expertise in a room of marketers and agency people. Why would we need validation from so much more? I mean, if your insight is well researched and if your strategy is well founded, you should be fine. But we're not. We go and research and check and check and check, and then we change, and then we second guess, and then we end up with advertising.
When you talk to clients about this takeaway approach, how do you try to convince them of your vision, and what are some of their counter arguments?
So this is in infancy. We've only put 3 clients through our takeaway system in the last 12 months. So it's 12 months in the making. So we're also building evidence. But it's definitely in, because we've launched on this 26 years ago, and then within 3 years we outgrew the model in South Africa. And in Amsterdam, my friend that runs that agency and partner in crime, really loved the model, and it was quite a thing for him to give up on it. So we are bringing it back slowly, and it's building evidence. It's just to build comfort with clients that they actually can trust us to do our jobs. I always say to our clients have got so much more pressure than we do. They really do. I mean, I have a lot of empathy for CMOs, because, I mean, advertising is one little part of what they do. They're marketers. They do marketing. We do advertising. I mean, I know some of our CMOs that have to go through, and they deal with their business people who don't trust them often, or who think that they kind of a bunch of creative people, which they're not. So it's quite a journey to go on with your client. And that's why I'm so big into, you have to build trust first. You just have to build trust to do good work. And hopefully as I grow older and a bit more wiser, I'm seeing it more and more clearly that's what we have to build, because yeah, it takes a lot of bravery for a client to go with really strong work.
We hear a lot of agency consultants and agency people talking about the end of the billable hour, the fact that agencies should stop billing hours and should go more towards value-based, etc. What's your take on that?
We're debating this all the time now, because what comes with billable hours are systems like timesheets, and creative people hate timesheets, and rightly so. I mean, if you're executive, it's easy, but if you're on the ground, you have to fill in timesheet. It's a nightmare. So I don't know where this is going to lead us, but this industry is dealing with procurement, and that's another thing that's come into our space in the last decade, is procurement. And you can't have procurement discussions without having billable hours. It's just crazy. Whoever came up with this whole billable hour system has really harmed our industry. I mean, I know for a fact that margins have dropped. Agencies, any good business should make a 20% margin. Agencies make 5%. If they're lucky, 7, 8%, maybe 10% if they're super lucky. So the current billable hour model is probably there to rationally argue with your worth to a procurement person. But I mean, what was the value of child days? Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. What was the value of that piece of writing to the Apple brand in 1998? I mean, you can't put money to that value that was added to that brand there. And I can say the same for Nike. I can say the same for a lot of brands. You almost can't put an hourly value to the value that's added to the brand. And yeah, hopefully in time, as we get to do more work that add more value, because I could also argue that agencies are not adding enough value. We don't add enough value because we all fell into this rats and mice churn out nonsense that AI can do. So we have to take responsibility that we have not been focused enough on doing great work. And we must first, before we can even point finger or try and change the model, I think start by doing better work. And as you start proving that that work adds value to your client, because you can see what's the consumer's perception of the brand. Did you shift the brand perception? Oh, this brand is not very digital, and then a year later you've done a phenomenal campaign and everyone perceives this as most digital brand in the market. It all starts with doing better work, and we don't do enough of that.
American consultant Michael Farmer was a previous guest of ours, and he called the agency model broken. He said agencies are working themselves ragged, which you also double down on, and they don't get paid enough in return. Do you agree? You think agencies should drastically raise their prices?
The statement is 100% correct, but I think we're focusing on where the real problem is. And if I look back 30 years ago, the CEO of an agency was as obsessed about the product as the creative director. I mean, that's why I love Apple as an example, and Steve Jobs for whatever. I mean, I don't know him personally, so I don't know. But if I just look at his behavior as a CEO, he was passionate about his product. In our industry, I mostly see the creative leaders speaking with passion about product. I think that's the biggest problem. What's happened to the ad men and the ad women? The business people that should be passionate about their product. So yes, the model is broken. Yes, agencies are killing themselves to make low margins. But that whole problem started when we lost focus on what is important to this industry, which is our creative product. And that should not just be the mandate of the maker. That's the mandate of the strategist. That's the mandate of the CEO. That's the mandate of the MD, the BUD. But that mandate's been lost because everyone's just trying to make a return on investment for churning anything. So I do think it starts with ourselves, and hopefully we as an agency, because we're independent, we don't have those shareholders. Hopefully we can lead the way in time, but now that's quite a big ask.
So if I may conclude this part, first, as an industry, we should refocus on where our strength really lies, and that's in the creativity that we can offer. Then we can start giving more value to our clients, and only then can we rethink the price that we ask for that
100%. It's the weirdest thing for me that you start a financial year, and let's say your turnover was $100 million, and now you want to grow by 5% to 105 million. Your discussions start there. I'm going, no. What was your product level? How can you improve your product? And again, that's what Apple shows us. They focus on how do they improve their product, and the money is a byproduct of that focus on product improvement. So I think we've got the whole thing the wrong way around as an industry, and you've said it perfectly. To me, we can't have that discussion on pricing until we fix our product.
Pepe, let's move on to a topic that is dear to you and that we've talked about a lot here at Agency Life, purpose. We even have an article about it in our upcoming print magazine for Agency Life. It's called The Final Word on Purpose and Purpose Marketing. But we'd also like to have your opinion on it, because I think you have a quite singular perspective on the topic of purpose. You even wrote a doctoral thesis about it. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I'm almost feeling that people are losing that obsession that there was with purpose. And that's happening for two reasons. Because everyone's failing on implementation. And also my view is people don't really understand exactly what it is. I've started I'm actually busy doing a proposal to a London-based client because I want to run a purpose workshop with him. And I found myself not using the word purpose. because I think the word purpose is a bit tainted. And I used essence. I actually started using the word essence. Like, what is the essence of the brand? Or what is the essence of the human being? Like, what is your essence? Like, what is your reason for being? What is at your core? And when I look at brands in the world that are defined by one word, I could only find one, and that's Volvo. I thought, geez, that's so fascinating. You know, Al Ries, there we go. If I had to put a research, which I haven't done, but if I had to research 1,500 people on Volvo, I can not guarantee you, but I have a hunch, 75% will say safety. If I take any other brand, if I take Nike, Apple, any other massive brand, BMW, whatever, I will not get that level of playback. And Al Ries wrote in his, whatever it was called, the Immutable Laws of whatever, in one of his strategic books, he wrote to the power of one word in terms of marketing. Like, if you can create your brand around one word. So I fell in love with this notion of purpose because it changed my life on a personal level. And then I brought it into our business with the support of my partners who trusted me enough to bring this thinking into our business. And I saw a shift in my life that was phenomenal. And then I saw a shift in the business, which was phenomenal. And then it was so profound that I had to go and see if I could put data behind it. But it's early days. I'm on a journey. I can tell you one thing. I understand it. Like, I have not met many people that understand it to the depth that I understand it. And I say that completely with confidence and not any arrogance, but I really understand it deeply because I've lived it now for 17 years and I've studied it. And it's very, very simple. The model that I got accepted into my doctoral thesis was what is called the human being model. And I think what's happened to us as people is we've all become human. So we all advocate our humanness, but we've forgotten that we're human beings. It's a very interesting insight when you start thinking about it. The human, the conditioned, all these problems that we all internally face, and then the beingness, the spirituality within each of us. And what I discovered on my journey over the past 17 years is just like each of us have a human name. So Robin, Louise, Pepe, it's the human name. We each have a being name that's deeply in our unconscious, and it drives us forward, but we've never interrogated what is the name, what is that name? And if you had to do a process in Dutch or in French, that word will be the same, or in English. So we each carry these words deeply in our unconscious, and without clarity of that word, we don't have a strategy for our lives. So we just go weekend to weekend to weekend to weekend to weekend. But once you actually find that word, it gives you a new, you go, geez, you actually become aware, oh, I can now see a pattern through my last 20 years of behavior. So I found that is absolutely it's not even my truth. That's the truth. When I do process work with people, every single time, there's a deep insight that resides in people. They're not aware of it. And then on top of that, I then started asking the question that if it's a human being, then a business must be a being too. Because our bricks and mortar business, Joe Public, I have the same emotional connection to it as a founder that I have to my own flesh and bone child. I've got that same emotional connection. My son, my flesh and bone son, much more precious in terms of if his life's in danger. But if someone bullies my son, I will be very protective. If someone bullies our brand, I get quite feisty. So I believe that businesses are business beings, and they all have a name. So ours is Joe, and it's a human name that we give them at birth. Ogilvy is a human name, but they've got a being name. And you can do work to define and find out Volvo, human name, being name, safety. And it's so fascinating because if you can go and do that work with brands, and I will put myself out there, any brand that ever I've designed work that gets a brand, I work with executives. I know for a fact that there's an unconscious reason for every brand that exists, and it was there because the founder founded it for that reason. Brands aren't founded to make money. They're founded to add value to life. And people are unaware of it. So everyone just chases the money. But if you start chasing the purpose, the money follow in more abundance. And that's why I put a lot of data behind it. And there's a lot of data points, lots of studies done on the fact that purpose-driven organizations are more profitable, more sustainable, high engagement. There's lots of data. So yeah, the value that I bring to the purpose conversation is that it starts with one word.
What can agency leaders take away from this research that you're doing? What can they do or implement immediately?
Yeah, difficult one, because even me, with my passion, I'm finding it difficult to implement. Like I could implement it into our business because I'm a founder. So I've got a level of control or influence. Let me not call it control. I've got a high level of influence in my own organization. So I could bring it into the organization and build it into the culture. And we've seen a phenomenal change in the sustainability and the financial viability of the business because of it. Because it gives clarity. Because you employ 300 people and no one knows why they're coming to work. But if they know they're coming to work to do this. So I suppose all I can leave anyone that's listening and watching with is rather just this thought that every brand, no matter what its human name is, because you have to assume a human gave that name to that brand at some point. A founder at some point, or a person came up with a brand and called it something. But at that point, there was a second name at the heart of that brand, and that was that was the noble intention of why that brand was put onto this planet. And I think if people can start working on what is that intention of the brand in one word, and find that word, and then create a strategy around that word, it's got such long-term potential. And the only brand globally that's gotten that right, in my view, is Volvo. And you can see that most of their big brand work is always aligned to an aspect of safety.
Do I have it right that in your definition or in your vocabulary, purpose is not so much that one big social mission that your company wants to contribute to, but actually the one word essence why your brand exists?
100, and that's such a good point, Robin. That's where people miss the plot a lot. They started thinking it's CSI. It's got nothing to do with that. So if you take Joe Public, I would have assumed when I ran these processes back in 2009, that's 15 years ago already, we put purpose in the heart of our business. It is the essence of the business. You would assume what's the one word that Joe Public stands for is creativity, because it's a creative business. But that's what we do. It's not why we do what we do. And when we ran this process, we were only 30 people then. So I broke them up into teams of 5, 6 teams of 5. And Laurent, my strategic partner, one of the shareholders, he called it why digging. Just start asking, but why do you come to work? Once you say to pay my bond and to get a salary and all that nonsense, every single team agreed they came to our business to grow. They came to our business to grow. So out of that process, the word that came up was growth. And then when we said, okay, but what exactly does it mean? Because if I say red, if I say the color red, then Louise will think maybe of, I don't know, love or passion, and you might think of anger, and I might think of red wine or whatever. You know, you think of different things when you just have a word. So you must define the word. And then when we define the word, the definition was to serve the growth of our people, our clients, and our country. That was the intention. So that was the intention of why our business exists. But then we asked, but how do we bring that to life? Through the greatness of creativity. And then all we focused on, we realized, okay, well, if we exist to grow people, clients, country, how we do it is through the greatness of creativity. Then the greater our product, the more we're going to grow people, clients, country. So it became this beautiful ecosystem. And of course, because of the country pillar to our purpose, there is a bit of CSI to it. But the CSI in our purpose is 5%. 95% of our business, of our purpose, is a culture driver, it's a business driver, it's a service driver. It is probably the most profound way of leading a business.
Let me make it a bit more personal towards you, Pepe, because you seem to walk around with a very positive attitude. A while back, you criticized the new Nike campaign on LinkedIn, and then a couple of days later, you deleted that post and wrote a new one that kind of said, life's too short to criticize other creatives' work. Are you this positive 24/7, or do some things actually grind your gears?
On that Nike piece of work, I highly respect White and Kennedy, but I'm also into sport. And I just couldn't comprehend. There's only one of the pieces, like it said, I dream of destroying their dreams. I just couldn't get my head around that an athlete would behave like that. That your whole mission for getting up in the morning is to destroy your dreams. So I had a bit of a instant reaction to it. But then when I went and I actually thought about actually commenting on White and Kennedy's work, I went, but who the hell am I to comment on an agency's work of that stature? You know? And instantly I felt myself almost being hypocritical, because I know how difficult it is to do great work. And they've done, in my opinion, mostly the most phenomenal work for Nike over the years. And that's why I then retracted it. I am very, I'm working on my own personal emotional intelligence at the age of 56. I can get quite angry. No, not angry. I can get very frustrated when people just don't, like, often I see people better than they see themselves. And it frustrates me when people don't see themselves as amazing. And then I get a bit, then I almost go against my own, what I'm trying to achieve. I can break people. But I would honestly say, I can't think of a day in my entire 56 years on this planet that I've not woken up with, like, let's do this. You know, so I'm an extremely positive person. And I'm actually more and more trying to step into that light of my positivity, because it brings out more in people. It's a new journey for me. I've just come back from Spain with a very good friend of mine who's invited me to spend the most phenomenal week, which included a silent retreat of 4 days and 3 nights, no food, no water, in the, you know, just to center myself and to get to my essence, because I really want to bring that positivity that you're picking up. That's why, like, I'm so aware that nothing that I want to say is like, oh, we are living in the best time to be alive. There are massive challenges, but if you don't have problems, you don't have solutions. You can't be creative without problems. So it's actually, as for a creative person, it's the best time to be alive, because there's so many challenges. Yeah, so that's the long and the short of it. I don't do drugs, so this is just natural happiness.
Speaking about growth, from a personal level, are there any exciting projects that you yourself are currently working on that you want to tell us about? A book, perhaps?
Yes, so interesting you say that. I'm starting my 3rd book. I've just signed a deal. I try to get a book outside of the borders of South Africa. Not very easy. And that's something I do aspire to. I've still got an ego, but it's not as big as what it used to be. So I wouldn't want to be an international bestseller for the sake of just my own glory, but I really think I've got some really deep insight to share, and I want to get it beyond our borders. But I signed with quite a big South African publication house. They've just signed. Well, they've just approved it. I now have to sign the contract. It's absolutely in infancy, and I'm going to be writing my 3rd book next year. The deadline is October, to release in February 2026. And I'm going to write it again, as everything I do is on purpose. and how it links to creativity. Because my fascination with purpose is because it unlocks human creativity. Yeah, so that's my big project. So that's the one. And then the other one is we are in talks with a technology company from Belgium. I'm very excited. I'm very, very, very fond of both their founders. I think there's an opportunity, and I know they know there's an opportunity to put creativity and technology together. So that's another big thing for me.
I want to wrap up things with one last question, Pepe. What is the single most important advice you would give to people running a creative agency?
Sure. I've got two things, because I would be contradicting my belief if I don't say the first thing. I would highly advise that you go and do a little bit of a soul search and define the purpose of your business, because it builds culture. In the end, there's many agencies that can make beautiful work. So your competitive advantage will always be your culture, because culture is what attracts and retains people and motivates people. And I have found that purpose is one of the most powerful tools to build a culture around. That'll be the first thing. And the second thing is just to make creativity and the excellence of creativity your number one focus in your business. So that will come second to purpose, but the two they work hand in hand.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pepe, for joining us all the way from. It was in Johannesburg that you were, right?
Yeah.
You call that like Joburg? Is that like a cool name too?
Yeah? It is, and what's so cool about it, Joburg is spelled J-O with an apostrophe Berg, but you can also go J-O-E, because then it's Joe Public Berg, Joburg.
Smart. Always branding those creative guys. Where can people learn more about you or your work, Pepe?
So I'm so excited. We finally about to finish our new website, which is going to have some of our new work on, but that's only going to go live probably January. It's taken years because we're always busy with our clients' work. And it's going to be relaunched under joepublic.com. We've gone for the global handle. We bought it from some oak that charges a lot of money for it, but we bought it because we want to go global. I'm on LinkedIn. I engage. That's my only social platform I'm on. And yeah, anyone who wants to reach out and connect, I love connecting with people, and because we're all on this mission of creativity. So.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, Pepe, and for sharing your insights. Next time, Robin, let's do this in Joburg, right?
Yes, oof. I'll go look for my international passport. Yeah.
Guys, on a side, let me just first say thank you very, very much just for the exposure and for the time, your time and the interest. But if you ever do come to Joburg, I am one of the biggest patriots in this country, and I make sure people see the good side of this town. So if you ever do, you just know to call. I'll show you animals that you've never seen, and I'll show you some amazing places that no one's ever seen in this town. So yeah, just keep that as an open invitation if you ever do.
Well, we have it on tape now, so
we'll keep you to that promise.
Yeah, you can keep me to it. I'm big on that. I promise you now.
Well, thanks again, Pepe, and to anyone listening. If you don't want to miss a minute of our adventures in South Africa or of anything else agency life, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that on agencylife.be or agencylife.nl.